Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome again to yet another session of Shooting from the Nib, our series of talking head sessions where we interview some very interesting guests every weekend. Uh, we have had a lot of sessions so far, and we've had on our show, we've had pen sellers, we've had pen makers, we've had pen enthusiasts who restore pens, we've had nib grinders, we've had one person who does a bit of calligraphy, handwriting analysis, we have handwriting experts. Today we have yet another very interesting guest for you. Her name is Rachna Takawale, and she's a calligrapher. If you're in Mumbai, you might have attended one of her sessions. She does a lot of sessions on calligraphy. So let me call her here. Hey, hi Rachna, good evening. How are you doing today?
Hi, good evening, Sudhir. I'm doing good. How are you? Thank you for
I'm good
having me.
too. It's our pleasure. Thank you for being here, for spending time with us on a weekend.
My
Uh,
pleasure.
Right. So, Rachna, we, like you know, you might have seen our previous sessions. What we
Yes.
usually do is we have a set of questions that we ask you. Without trying to fox you or bowl you any googlies, we'll try to keep them simple. And yeah, it will be more about your experience. So let's just
Okay.
jump into it. See, if I remember correctly, you had a corporate job, right? And
Yes.
you gave that up and got into calligraphy full time. How was
Yes.
your experience of doing that? How was your transition like?
Um, it was a very bumpy transition, to be honest, because it wasn't planned as such. Because I have an advertising background, and it was nothing to do with arts. Basically, I was a brand manager there. So I worked at about three advertising agencies, starting from Scarecrow Communications, then moving on to McCann, and the last stint was at Lowlandas, which was slightly longer. It was for 3 years. And when I was at Low, I got introduced to modern calligraphy. Basically, it was only through internet. I was just looking. I basically love Pinterest, so I keep pinning a lot, and I had seen a lot of this modern calligraphy that time. I didn't even know what it was called or what pointed pen calligraphy was. So I wanted to learn something, and because my weekends would go in shooting, I had no time to paint. I was so frustrated because from the beginning I was always wanting to be associated with the art. So I think I just got conned by my parents and by people around me saying that, oh, advertising is going to be, it's everything about the arts and you're going to have a good time and everything. But after I did my BMM, then I went to advertising. A brand manager's job is basically taking care of people, basically handling relationships. So I think for the best, for most of my time, that's what I was doing. I had no time for myself or for the arts, and kind of uh, from the big like wanting like since you've been painting right from childhood, and absolutely for 6 years not having to pick up a paintbrush was I think causing me a lot of anxiety. So there was a time, I think, after 6 years, in something around 2016, I just decided one fine day that I'm going to just quit my job. I'm going to take like a sabbatical for a year and sit at home and just paint or do calligraphy, because I've been wanting to learn it for so long. And I had started self-learning a little bit through YouTube videos and reading up about it and getting some tools from my friends in the US. And I was really bad at it. I didn't know what were the supplies actually needed, what are the right nibs I'm supposed to be using, or the inks, and it was all over the place. So when I quit, I gave it more time. I found a teacher close by who helped me with it. At least I attended one of her workshops, and that's when I at least got my basics, slight basics in place. Like, okay, these are the nibs, these are the pens, and this is what I'm going to do with it. And I think since I started doing point and blank calligraphy in 2016, I haven't looked back, and I'm glad. Like, I always used to feel that it's not going to work out, and I'm going to have to go back to my corporate job. It's always there at the back. It was always there at the back of my mind, but I I think it's God's grace that it just worked out, and people gave such a good response on Instagram, and that's where I just started posting my work. I there was no plan as such to start a brand or start teaching people or to do something with it. It was just for myself, just a creative outlet, and it just resulted in something, I think, very beautiful for 4 years now, and I'm very happy with it. That
Yeah,
is
it
my journey.
okay. So it certainly seems to have worked out well, and good luck going forward. I'm sure
Thank you.
it'll work even better. Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's get down to calligraphy.
Right.
See, I'm not a calligraphy expert. I mean, I can barely write English. I have even forgotten how to write Devanagari script, which was the other one I learned in school. I can read it, but I try not to write it. English, I have what you would call a workman-like cursive handwriting. So, tell us a little bit more about calligraphy. I mean, I've heard that there's modern and traditional calligraphy.
Right.
How are they different? What really goes into each of them, and how are they defined? I mean, being
Yeah.
a science person, we want to look at definitions and stuff like that. So, how are they different? How does it go?
Okay, I'll tell you in simple words how different they are. So,
Mhm.
in calligraphy, there are two types. There is pointed pen calligraphy and there is broad edge. So, in broad edge, we have a Devanagari scripts, we have a Gothic script, we have italics, a foundation hand. All those scripts come under broad edge. Now, in pointed pen, there are basically what we call as traditional calligraphy. There are just two types of them. There is copperplate script and there is Spencerian script. Now, copperplate is something that originated back in England, and Spencerian was more like American cursive, is what we call it in the US. Modern calligraphy happens to come from has its roots in copperplate. So it came into being by mostly because wedding calligraphy or weddings are huge in they're huge in India also, but the demand for having handwritten cards or handwritten wedding invites, something personal like a wedding suite, is much more important outside of India, and where you know I guess this is my understanding that I guess that's when back maybe let's just go back like 4 or 5 years, is where pre-wedding shoots, having something to do before the wedding, has taken up a lot more of importance for the brides as well. So they wanted, like the younger generation has been wanting something which is much more fun. Like if your pre-wedding shoot is fun, it's having a lot of colors and something, you cannot have a traditional calligraphy that goes with it. So uh, resulting in a need for having something which matches, or having something which flows, or basically talks about the mood of the wedding or the function that you're giving. That's when I think modern calligraphy came into being. So it looks a lot more like copperplate, but it has a more bounce to it, so that it gives a very fun feeling, a very casual feeling when you see the script. It's not form based, or it's not very rigid or formal as such. Is just really fun. So that's where modern calligraphy comes in, and it's not a very I don't would not be able to tell you the origins, because it's not anywhere on the internet. Also, if you look back as to when modern calligraphy originated, there is basically no year as such when it came into being, but if you could trace it back, it would be like about 5 to 6 years is when it started popping up. And the difference between both the scripts, like copperplate and modern calligraphy, is like what I said, is just the nature of how the script makes you feel. Like traditional is more formal, modern is much more fun, it's more casual. That's the approach that it takes. And pointed pen calligraphy is defined by its thick and thin strokes. Like in broad edge, you have a nib which is thick, whereas in pointed pen calligraphy, you use a nib which is pointed basically. And when you add pressure on that nib is when you when the nib produces a thick stroke, and when you don't add any pressure on it, it basically gives you a thin stroke. So it's a mix of a thick and thin stroke, whereas broad edge, you mostly write thick with pressure, right? And when you change the angle of the nib
Mhm.
is when you get a thin stroke, whereas in pointed pen, it's exactly on the amount of pressure that you are adding on the nib will you get the shades of the script, right?
Okay, okay. So that's interesting to know because we had Prasad on one of our sessions earlier, and one of the things that he told us was, uh, unless the part about calligraphy is that it follows a very rigorous, strict set of
Right.
rules,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And for somebody like me, that's kind of a put off. I mean, if
Yeah.
I'm writing, I would not want to do that. But modern calligraphy sounds like fun. I mean, if it's a little more informal,
Yeah.
and if the rules can be bent a little bit, I wouldn't say
Bent a little
broken.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So
No,
maybe that's it.
so it's absolutely, if you're just looking to dip your toes into calligraphy, especially pointed pen calligraphy, it's a good way to start. And especially if you, like you said, if you're not someone who wants to follow all the rules, or you're just worried whether you would be able to, respect the traditional calligraphy rules. If you're not someone who can do that, then you can try modern calligraphy. It's a very good starting point to move to learning copperplate and Spencerian, because they are very heavily rule based. They're beautiful rules, to say the least, but they can be sometimes intimidating to people because they are slightly more strict about the way the letter forms should be. Whereas in modern, it's like it's okay. It's more about developing your own style. It's more like your own handwriting that you're modifying by using another tool and creating calligraphy out of that. So it's slightly more easier, and the tools are also quite flexible
Okay, so
for
sounds like something I can think of. Very good, very
definitely.
interesting. So, what are the tools that you use normally when you're creating such beautiful art? And you spoke about pointed pen calligraphy. Can you go a little bit into detail about pointed pen calligraphy, and
Sure.
in general about what tools you use?
Okay, so the tools that you use for modern calligraphy or for traditional calligraphy remain basically similar. One is your pointed pen nib that you can use, a pointed pen nib,
Mhm.
and a holder. Now, holders can be of two types. You can use either an oblique holder or a straight holder. We'll get into that a little bit later. Then you have brush pens, which are basically not like your sketch pens, but these have a felt tip, which can be after when you add pressure on the tip, you will probably get a thick stroke, and if you don't add pressure, you get a thin stroke. So basically, it follows the rules of a pointed pen calligraphy. Whereas your sketch pens don't do that; they're really hard tip ones. So you have they're called brush pens. You can also use any paint brushes, like your watercolor brushes, since they're the bristles of those brushes are softer. They can be used for calligraphy also. So depending on the size or the number of the brush you buy, you could get variation of strokes with those as well. The other tool that you could use is you could use your gel pens or any pen basically, and you can create something called as for calligraphy or monoline calligraphy. Now, for calligraphy is basically you drawing out the letters and filling it up with any color or any ink, and monoline is you mimicking writing in calligraphy, but only in a thin stroke or in a like your handwriting would be. But it would basically look like calligraphy also in the same. It will also look like calligraphy. So the tools are the same whether you use it for traditional or whether you use it for modern. So point pen calligraphy, like about four tools, like I spoke about, is what you could use. And now that you also see flex pens, flex nib pens coming up. So these are like flex nibs put into your fountain pen, so that you don't have to keep dipping the pen into ink. So you can use your regular fountain pen ink in the flex nib pen, and the nib produces beautiful thick and thin strokes. So maybe by the end of at the end of the session, I can show you these pens and demonstrate that as well, so that you'll get a better idea of what are these tools that you can actually use for point to pen calligraphy.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to say the least. I mean, good fun to see it happen on screen live,
Yes, I'll
right?
definitely
I
do that.
Yeah, I also heard you mention these words: oblique holder, straight holder. For a
Yes,
complete noob like me, you will have to explain this a little bit in detail if you can do that. What
I'll
does
do
an
that.
oblique holder mean? What is a straight holder? What do they do differently?
Okay. So basically I'll show you on screen as well. So this is
Yeah.
a straight holder, okay, like a regular straight pen, and this is where you would put in your nib, and it would look like any other pen, okay, like this. Now this is an oblique holder. Now you see there's a metal flange coming out at the side. So when you add a nib to that on the side, it is a more fancy tool for calligraphy, and I'll tell you what it does as well, like this. So, okay, where am I pointing? Yeah. So this is your oblique holder, this is your straight holder, and both of these have flex nibs put into them. So what does the oblique holder do is basically helps you write at a 45-degree to a 55-degree angle. To explain in layman's words, it helps you write italics. Basically, if you don't have all of us, especially righties, don't have a very italic hand when we are writing. We usually used to writing slightly straight. So, and calligraphy, especially traditional calligraphy, demands that you write at a particular angle. Say for copper plate, it's anything between 45-degree to 55-degree, and in Spencerian, it's a 52-degree angle that you need to write on. But in modern calligraphy, there is no such angle that you need to follow. It's upon you. If you want to write italics in you want to write slightly italics, then you can use an oblique holder to guide your hand to write in italics, or you could use a straight holder to write italics. Or the straight holder basically works for righties as well and for left-handed people as well. So that's why my personal preference is a straight holder. And me personally, I have a slight italic handwriting. My handwriting is also slightly italic, so I don't find it very difficult using this holder to get an angle, to get my angles right. And also, there's a very easy trick that you could use if you don't want to get into oblique, the fancy holders. Is you could just keep your writing pad slightly at an angle, and you and sit straight on the table and get the italic or the angle of your script right. It's a very simple thing to do, but many people don't do that. So if you could do all of that, you'll easily be able to write. So oblique holder is just a fancy tool. It looks really cool. I mean, no pen would be looking something like this, and anybody would want to own it. Like every beginner wants to write with a oblique holder, but when you're into it, you'll probably realize you could do the same thing with a straight holder as well.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, it does look very cool. I mean, it's what you think of when you think calligraphy, right? You think of people holding that oblique holder at an angle. So you're saying it's just to give the nib that angle, and if you can create that angle by any other means, that serves the purpose equally well.
Absolutely, because in the beginning, when calligraphy came into being, they were using quill pens, like made out of feathers, geese feathers. That time, there was no oblique holder. So it is about your writing position, which is more important to get the angles right. So they were using straight holders back then. There were no obliques. Obliques are new inventions. So they've just come into being. But they just...
But yeah, they do look cool.
They are cool. They definitely.
I'm pretty sure a lot of people who don't know how to use them still keep them and say that it's a cool thing to keep.
Yeah, they're like collectors. I mean, you can keep buying them. They really look good.
And the materials are really interesting too. I mean, I've seen some of them which are made with really fancy material.
Absolutely. Like you can use acrylic. I'll show you a couple of my holders. I have a lot of them. Though you basically just need one to write with. But yeah, like with a mix of wood or complete acrylic, like going transparent, or different kinds of wood, like an ebony wood or a rosewood. And depending upon the weight that you want, like some people prefer a heavy-handed holder, like a heavy holder, like you would prefer going for a rosewood one or an ebony holder. Personally, I like lightweight holders because if I write with anything that's too heavy, I feel my hand is tilting towards the other side. So you need to, when you're doing calligraphy, and especially when you're starting off, it's ideal to start with something which a holder which is lightweight, so that you understand whether your strokes are coming out right. Because a heavy holder, and if you are someone who adds a lot more pressure on your nib, there are chances that the strokes are going to not look really neat. So if you write with a lighter holder, your strokes will also look really nice. So, and you need to basically get to a point where you can control the pen and not let the pen control you. So those are the things it comes with time, and you'll probably learn. But yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's all really fascinating stuff. So see, we are ultimately fountain pen buffs, okay? Not just me, most people here are fountain pen buffs. Do you think fountain pens can be used for calligraphy? I mean, especially the stub nib ones, or these days we have these pilot parallels, which are nothing but a block. Yeah, and can you use them for calligraphy? How interesting would that be?
So yes, you can use the stub nib ones and the pilot parallel ones for broad edge calligraphy, but not for pointed pen calligraphy. Because pointed pen, like I said, you need to get the variation of the thick and thin strokes where you are controlling it and not the other way around. So in fountain pen also, like I told you in the beginning, there are a lot of flex nibs that are coming into the market, and you can always get a custom made pen for yourself with probably a Nico G put into it, or like a zebra nib put into it, which doesn't basically rust by being in the fountain pen for so long with the ink. But you anyway, after a point of time, they do rust, and you're going to have to change the nib. But there are a lot of gold nibs, flex nibs that are there, and if you speak to your maker, they will be better people to suggest like what nib would go into it and which would mimic your maybe whatever favorite pointer pen nib that you have, and they'll be able to guide and make that nib for you. And yes, you can, and it works. Like I have a couple of flex nib pens, so I can show you those as well at the end, and you can check with the makers whether they can make that for you. Like I basically get my flex nib pens made from MK Art Shop. The owner's name is Mukesh, and he's made most of my oblique holders and all of my straight holders as well. So any custom made order, I get it made from him. So they can definitely guide you. But well, I have just started doing broad edge calligraphy, and I use the pilot parallel pen for doing Old English and fractal. And it works very well. And for Devanagari, I have a custom made pen. The nib was basically a fountain pen nib, which has been modified for Devanagari as per my requirement. But yeah, you could definitely use fountain pen. It's much easier to carry them around. You don't need to carry, like for if earlier, if I just carry this pen and I'm traveling, I need to carry an ink bottle separately with me, which if I'm taking in the flight, it's a misery, because most of the time my ink gets it spills all over. Whereas now with the flex pen, I just put in my favorite ink into that pen, and I just have to carry one pen, and I can do my calligraphy from any part of the world. I don't have to worry about any ink spillage, nothing. Just fill it up and you're good to go. So that way, it's been great owning a flex nib pen.
Okay, great. Good to know that fountain pens are being used in calligraphy.
Yes.
They can be used in some way. Rachna, thank you very much. It was very interesting talking with you. Those were the
Thank
set of
you.
questions I had. I am now going to call Kshitij on screen, and
Yeah.
we'll request Kshitij to go ahead with the next set of questions. Hi, Kshitij. Good evening.
Hi Sudhir, good evening. Hi Rachna, how
Hi,
are you?
hi, Kshitij. I'm good. How are you? It's a
Good,
long
all well.
time.
Long time, and probably we won't be seeing each other for a long time more.
Yes. Definitely miss the
So,
sessions outside.
yeah,
Meeting you guys.
not
Yes,
meeting friends in general has been one of the biggest downsides of the current
absolutely.
situation. So,
Absolutely.
Rachna, it was really interesting hear you speak about the different aspects of calligraphy. Personally, I've just dipped my toes and tried to feel the water as far as calligraphy goes. One of the things as a beginner that I found, uh, a tough time making my decision was is choosing the right nib to start with, because even in
Right.
calligraphy, you have a wide range of nibs to choose from. So, what do
Yeah.
you feel are some of the good beginner nibs?
uh, the beginner nib that I feel is I think that when you're starting off, you should use a nib which is more flexible rather than using a nib which is more stiff. So when I say flexible, you could look at nibs like your Hero 40 or your Hero 41. So every nib basically in pointer pen calligraphy has a name and has a number. So when I'm saying these are the names and the numbers of the nibs, which you could probably even Google or check on Amazon, and you will find them. So Hero 40 is even called as the Leonard 40, and same way the Hero 41 is also called as the Leonard 41 or the shorthand nib. So these are flexible nibs, and they adhere to every kind of pressure. Like if you're someone who adds a lot of pressure, the nib will be able to resist it, or is not. It doesn't take too far. The nib will not go to a point where it will break as well. So it is a good nib for that. And if you're someone who adds very less pressure, with even less pressure, it produces a beautiful thick stroke. Whereas when you compare it to stiffer nibs, you need to have a lot more practice to use, because what is it that it resists pressure a lot more because they're made out of steel, so they're slightly more difficult to use, especially your G nibs like your Nico G or your Tachikawa. So these are the nibs that are slightly more difficult, and I personally feel that you shouldn't be giving these nibs to a beginner to write to work with, because I have seen those people struggle. I have been one of them who started off with the Nico G nib, and it made my life miserable. It still makes my life miserable, but I just guess um, in the beginning it's not a nib that you need to try. Stick to your flexible nibs like your Hero 40, your 41. Then there are speedball nibs like your Hunt 22, your Hunt 56, your Hunt 101. These are really really good nibs, and they are again in the zone of mid level flexible, but they work very very well, and they're very good for beginners also to try them out. Then you have your Principal EF, or the Bros 361. So these are there are a couple of like I kind of mentioned about 8-9 nibs now already. So these all will work as beginner friendly nibs, and even seasoned calligraphers use these nibs. So there is absolutely no worry that only when you're starting off you need to use it. I personally use the Hunt 22 a lot more even now, and the Hunt 56 also. And depending on what kind of material that you're writing on, like especially when we come to paper, when we would talk about it later, I'll tell you what nibs work best on those kind of papers also, because a nib reacts differently to different kinds of papers also. So, and your ink also comes into question. So when you're in the starting off, try, I would not say that stick to one nib. Try all of the nibs that I mentioned. You will have one or two which you will really love, and you can stick to for a really long time. And when you find those two nibs, make sure that you buy like a couple of them, because sometimes when you just buy one, there could be one that could come out faulty and it might not work for you. So make sure that if you found the one, the nib, buy a couple of them and use them, because they kind of get spoiled really fast, and they rust also very fast. So yeah.
So that was interesting. I think as a noob, I was only aware about the Nico G nibs because everything else that you mentioned might not be easily available. Are these relatively easy to source within India, or do you have to pick them up from outside and get them shipped to you?
And no, most of them are easily available within India. Like there are a lot of most of them are easily available on Amazon, and there are a lot of
Okay.
stores also that have started stocking up. Like if we talk about, I could probably tell you about Bombay. Would be Art Lounge has a couple of nibs, especially the Leonard nibs they stock up on, the manuscript basically, the bigger company being. Then there's Hindustan Trading Company, which is in Chennai, but is considering the online stores pretty active. You get it there. Then in Delhi, there's Sitaram Stationaries. They have a lot of, but they have a lot of Nico G nibs. They don't have the manuscript ones as many. But yeah, relatively compared to when I started off calligraphy to now most of the material is available in India. You don't need to have friends or source it from abroad. You're getting it here,
That's very
and
true.
there are a lot of calligraphers also who are keeping these materials, so that I mean they get a lot of them, so making it easily available for the people out there.
That's good to know. So one of the things with these nibs, I think most of them are made based on some kind of carbon steel, and they tend
Yes,
to
yes,
rust quite quickly. So
yeah.
do you have any tips or tricks to make them last a little longer?
Yes. So most of the manuscript nibs are made out of carbon steel. So and so those are the ones that tend to rust a lot faster. There is considering the moisture in the air in, I mean, in Bombay and most of parts of India, there's no way that you could probably stop the nibs from rusting. But the only thing that you could do is probably slow down the rusting process. What you could do is like in our shoe boxes and in our bags, we get these silica gel packets. Let me just pick one for you. You could just put one of those packets in your see, it looks something like this. You would have probably seen them in our
Yep.
shoe boxes or in our bags.
Yes.
So just take one, and always make sure that you keep your nibs in a plastic box, or in a box which doesn't have any airtight box basically. So I keep mine in a plastic, remove out all the air, put one silica gel packet in it, and then keep it in another plastic box. Make sure that if you're keeping it in a tin box, that your tin is not already rusted, because if that is rusted, it's going to make the nibs rust even faster. So there's no way that you'll be able to slow down the process. So this is just one way that you could probably slow down the rusting. The other way is you could, if say for example your nib is already rusted, that doesn't mean that your nib cannot be used. You could use a zero number sandpaper, and with a very light hand you can sand your nibs wherever you see the rust, only in those areas, especially in the front of the nib where the reservoir is. So if you just rust that area slightly and clean it off with a dry cloth, most of the rust will be off the nib and it will look like a fresh nib. The color obviously would have come off, but it's fine. The nib would be clean. And what you can do is, and if you're not going to use it immediately, you can, in the hardware store, you have seen this spray called as this WD-40. It's a spray basically used to spray on the what do you call this, hammers and stuff like that,
Metal.
whatever. Yeah,
Okay.
on metal basically. So it's an
Yes.
anti-rust spray, and you get a really
Yes.
small size with a tube, a thin tube for it, so that you can spray it on your nibs as well. So once you've cleaned your nib and it's dry, you could just spray a little bit of WD-40, rub it with your finger on the front and the back of the nib, and just let it soak it in for about 10 minutes. And yeah, you can keep it, once it's, just clean it off with the tissue after 10-15 minutes, and then store it back in your box. So in that way, that will not let your nib rust at all. But this is a process you do not, you could do if you're not going to use your nib for about say 2-3 months. But if you're someone who's going to use it, like say today you have written and then after 15 days you're going to remove your nib and write, then I wouldn't suggest you doing that, because this is something like you're adding another layer of oils on your nib, which you would be removing the first time you buy a nib. Like when you first time buy a nib, it already comes with a coating, what we call as the manufacturer oils. So this is basically, the nib comes with this coating is so that it doesn't rust when it's with your stationery guys or with the manufacturers basically. And when you get the new nib, you need to prep the nib. So when you prep a nib, you basically remove all of the oils so that your nib can hold ink and write. But when you spray the WD-40, and you're basically recoating the nib, and you're not going to be able to write with it. So when you want to write again, you're going to have to repeat the process of removing these oils and then writing it. But after a point, I have noticed that after 2-3 times I have coated one of my nibs, and it just stopped writing. After a point, it just stopped holding a lot of ink. So I think that's a fault with the spray, and the nib doesn't adhere to that much kind of the oils that is there in the WD-40. So 1 or 2 times is okay, but in the long run, you're basically, your nib life is, if you're writing on everyday basis, probably would be a month or so, not more than that. And that is if you're writing every day for an hour or so. So your nib is not going to last that long. So if you're like I said, if you've just written today and you're going to write after a month or so, then probably you can use the WD-40. Otherwise, it's not a requirement. It's a natural process. It's metal. It's going to rust. So you might as well let nature take its course. You don't, other than just spoiling the nib even further.
So I had one of the, I mean, I still have it, the Bok nib units with the Zebra G nib and
Yeah.
feed attachment to it,
Yeah.
a threaded unit. So the nib was there in the pen, and I was using it for about a month, month and a half,
Okay.
working absolutely fine, no rust, no issues. And then the lockdown happened, and I completely forgot about the pen. I
Okay.
recently opened it, and there was some rust around the nib, and now the
Yeah.
damn thing is just stuck. I'm not able to get the nib out. And I
Oh my
tried
God. You
pulling
have
it
to
out,
pull it out
half
with
of
a
the nib.
plier.
No, half. I tried doing that, and half of the nib broke out, and half of it is stuck inside the
Oh
unit
my
now. So I
God.
need to take it to Sudhir or somebody and see if it can be saved.
Oh my God.
So my
That's
stupidity
really
aside,
bad.
my my next question is, what kind of inks can you use for calligraphy? Can you use your regular fountain pen inks too, or are there specific inks meant for only calligraphy?
Uh, you okay? There are specific calligraphy inks that you need to use for pointed pen calligraphy, but there are a lot of fountain pen inks also that can be used for pointed pen calligraphy. The one that I have been using for a while now are Krishna inks. Their inks work beautifully for fountain pens as well, and as well for calligraphy. I don't know the formulation that he has, but it's amazing. They're so thin, the ink is so thin, but I never thought it would be able to flow this beautifully through your nib. So basically, when you're doing point and pen calligraphy, your ink needs to be of a certain consistency for it to flow through your nib. Otherwise, a too thin ink can the ink just slides through the reservoir and through the tines and just falls on paper. It doesn't stay. It doesn't flow well. So, as a beginner, if you want to use inks, I would suggest you can use your Sumi ink. You get a smaller bottle as well. Like I have a bigger one. Sumi ink would be best. It's thick. It's a good consistency. You don't need to add any water to it and dilute it. You can use it as is. Just pour it into a jar and use it. Other than that, you can use walnut ink. Um, which you're getting easily again in India now. Or you could, there are a lot of these metallic inks that everybody is fond of and you want to use. So there are brands like Speedball, there's Dr. PH Martins, then there are Pearl X pigments where you can make your own ink with just the pigment by adding water and gouache in it. No, by adding water and gum arabic in it. And basically the gum arabic works as a binder which holds the pigment and pigment together, and the water helps it to flow as well. So you can use all of this, and like there is a wide variety of inks that can be used for calligraphy. Like you also have your the most expensive ones, the Fox and Quill ones, which are great, but slightly expensive. Then I'll just show you a couple of them. This is the Dr. PH Martin's iridescent range. It's
Okay.
metallic. So these are slightly thicker, and you need to give them a good shake and stir, and always you need to add a little bit of water in this ink. Always in another bottle. Don't mix water in your original bottle. You just spoil the ink. And separately, when you mix it, and you see that you test out every time that whether it's flowing well. If you feel like the ink is just not flowing for your thick strokes or your thin strokes, then you add slightly more water to it. It's all trial and error. You need to check all of that. Then there is something called as Pearlex. This is a pigment, basically a powder. I don't know if you'll be able to see. Sorry, yeah, this is just powder. And
Okay.
what you do is you take about a spoon of this powder, mix it with a couple of drops of gum arabic, which is your binder, and a bit of water, and you give it a good stir, and you will see that you make your own metallic inks with that. So when you're making custom inks, the Pearlex powders work very well because you can mix two or three kinds of Pearlex powders, pigments together, and make your own custom ink as well.
Make your own colors.
So
Okay.
yeah, make your own colors. And then there is you can also use paints like watercolors, especially the tube ones. They also work very
Mm-hmm.
well. So if you add take any watercolor tube paint into a jar and add a little bit of gum arabic and water to it, that also becomes your ink. And you can make custom colors with that. Any tints and shades can be made. Same way a gouache also works. Now a gouache gives a more matte kind of a feel, so you could use that. Poster paints work. So the amount of inks that you can use is crazy. Anything you could probably use to do calligraphy. You just need to uh, just find it. But if you're starting off, ideally try and stick to your Sumi inks till you're used to doing calligraphy, and then explore the other inks. There are a lot of them that you could they can give a try. Like you even have these palettes, the Finetech watercolor metallic palettes, which you can use. So they work. You just for this, it's a slightly longer process where you use your paintbrush to make paint like you would do for your watercolors, and then you have to just paint the
Okay.
back side of your nib where the reservoir is. Once it's full, you could write your stroke. So every time the ink gets over, you need to repaint the back of the nib and then write. It's slightly longer process, but it's fun if you're doing a smaller project. So there's a lot of things that you could probably look at. So in fountain
So you're
pen,
not
I
going to
have
get. Yeah.
Krishna inks. Sorry,
Sorry.
I have only
Continue.
used Krishna inks. No, I was just saying in fountain pens, I have found Krishna inks to work very well, and the Pelican inks also
Okay.
work quite well. So other than that, I haven't really tried.
So I think one thing, if somebody is using fountain pens, they would want to keep in mind is to not dip the pen into the ink bottle, because
Yes.
then they'll be leaving residue from the nib itself into
Yes.
the ink bottle. So it all would always, I guess, it would always be safe to take it out in some kind of container
Smaller jar.
and then
Yeah.
use the fountain pens. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we've spoken about the nibs and the inks. Like with fountain pens, the third pillar of the hobby is paper. So what
Yes.
kind of paper do you guys use in calligraphy? I mean, do you have specific kinds of paper? And do you have your favorites, or it's just any paper works?
No, I have favorites, and any paper doesn't work. There's a lot of
Okay.
like with your fountain pens also, you don't use any paper, right? So it's same thing for calligraphy, because there's a lot of feathering and bleeding of ink that happens, and it's absolutely frustrating because a pointed pen, what it does is, other than just bleeding and feathering, it even pulls down the fibers of the paper. So if that happens, it's absolutely a nightmare. And especially when you're starting off, you have no idea what you're using. You can't use your regular notebooks because it's just bleeding all over the place. So
Right.
you could use a lot of watercolor papers, because they're thicker in GSM, and they can hold ink also. Watercolor, you could use, there is a smooth paper for calligraphy would probably be your best friend, especially when you're starting off. So your hot press would be a good paper because it's absolutely smooth to write on, and it doesn't pull out any fiber. The nib will not be able to pull out, so you can use any nib on a hot press paper. Other than that, for practice, you could use your Rhodia pads. They are really good because the paper is really smooth to write on. Then you can also use your printer paper. Like if you want something which is extremely inexpensive, there's JK Bond XL paper and JK Cedar paper. JK Bond has a slight tooth to it, but JK Cedar is a very smooth paper. So you can use both of these printer papers. I have tried and tested them myself, and for everyday practice, I tend to use these papers. They're very good. There is no ink bleeding. There's no ink feathering. The nibs doesn't pull out the fibers of the paper. So they work very well. Starting off, stick to smooth paper. They'll work very well for you. Other than that, you could,
Okay.
if you're slightly more seasoned, you could, you'd see people write on deckled edge handmade papers, basically cotton rag papers. There are brands like Khadi Papers. Then there is a store in Bombay called as Bombay Paper, which makes handmade papers. So you could, these deckled edge papers, I have a few of them handy. This is a little far away. So
Or
you could use,
you could reach for them if you
yeah, I
want to.
just read
It
for
would be
them. Just,
interesting to see it.
yeah,
Yep,
I just,
sure.
okay. So this is the handmade paper that you have. These are like the deckled edges. So they're natural edges of the paper. That's how the paper is made. And the thing with this paper, it's got a slight texture. So if you are not someone who's used to writing on textured paper, especially if you started off, it can be slightly tricky because you need to understand what kind of nib works on textured papers. And same way goes with your watercolor papers, your cold press papers. Your cold press papers, every cold press paper of every brand will have a different kind of texture. So like your Arches is a very good brand, and the texture works beautifully with even a very stiff nib as well, and with a flexible nib as well. So Arches is good, but Fabriano will have a slightly more deeper texture. So with that, I ideally use a more flexible nib. Like when I'm using a paper which has a more tooth to it, is what you say, then, or a lot more texture to it, I prefer using my Hero 40 nib or my Hero 41. That's the one I reach out to most. But if I'm using Arches or something, I could write with my Nikoji or my Tachikawa or any sharp nib, like even my Hunt 101, which is a very sharp nib. It's very flexible, but if it's very sharp, it tends to just get caught on the fiber of the paper. And that's when what happens is, when you're going to make a thin stroke, it pulls out that fiber, and you will just see that the ink gets smudged, or it will, give you a thick stroke where you don't want one. And then it's slightly more difficult to fix that. It's obviously fixable, but not in every place. If it's a slight mistake, you can fix it. So yeah, it's slightly difficult to write on handmade handmade papers like these, and you get multiple colors in these, like you can get your navy blue, your black, your gray, blush color. So the papers are really beautiful to write on. But yeah, you need to be slightly used to doing calligraphy to use these papers, because there are no guidelines or guide sheets for them. Like you could print on, it's slightly difficult to print on these papers as well. So it's, you probably need to be a little more seasoned to use that.
So, speaking of papers, I had received a letter from you, and the beautiful calligraphy aside, what really stood out was the coffee soaked vintage looking paper that the letter was written on.
Oh my
And
god.
that was something that really blew me away.
So it's
So,
actually easy to do
yeah,
that. The coffee soaking paper, like you could do it to any paper which will hold which will not fold, basically. Like your printer papers, the GSM is very thin, like 100 GSM won't
okay,
work. Like if you have any paper which is 200 GSM or above, like 300 GSM, or like just take for example a handmade paper, it will soak very well like the coffee. So just make a tub full of it with 1 spoon of coffee and slightly hot water, and just dip it into it and remove, and it gives a beautiful parchment feel. I really love doing that. And like at some edges, you could leave it slightly more darker. Keep dipping it
right.
into the coffee concoction, and it gives a very good feel to it.
So, that doesn't affect your writing experience in any way.
No, absolutely not. It doesn't.
Okay. So, coming to my next question,
Yes,
we live in a time that would be really ideal for Eklavya because there's just so much information and so much you could probably watch on the internet and learn. So,
absolutely.
even in a situation like that, how does one pick the right source to learn the basics of calligraphy with so much information coming your way?
Okay, very important question this could be. So, a very simple way to do it, if you are not someone who wants to self learn, find a person or a teacher who would probably teach you well. Like, if you try and have a conversation, so, like it's a very social world, and we are all on social media. We are very, and everybody's become reachable. It's just one click away. So make sure that you find someone who is approachable, who is giving out information which works for you and you're able to understand. And um I guess just have an honest conversation about learning something. And there is not one person who will not reply back to you with your queries or with help. So one way is finding a good teacher who would probably teach you the basics. And once you have your basics, then you could you could dip your toes into different kind of things that you want to learn in calligraphy, because it's like a rabbit hole. Once you get into it, there is a lot more. It keeps on increasing. But if you're someone who wants to self learn, and especially the traditional scripts, there's a lot of information, and especially the right information available on IMPET. So the IMPET website has a lot of free information where you could have a look at your videos. You will get probably the guide sheets and even how the alphabets are created. So you could download all of that, give it a good read, go through the website, probably even become a member there, and read up on all the information that you get there. And that information is mostly written by all the penmen, and comes from a long time of history that is associated with calligraphy. And if you're looking to learn traditional calligraphy, then that's the place that you should be looking for information. Again, if you want to do modern calligraphy and if you want to understand that, um, when I started off, I referred to, you would have probably heard of Lindsay. She runs this website called as the Postman Knock. So if you just Google anything calligraphy, her website will pop up first, because she was the first person who probably started writing blogs on calligraphy. So you find a lot of information on inks, nibs, and stuff on her website. If you're just new into it, you'll even find free guide sheets and worksheets available there, and you can download that and start learning on your own if you are doing something called as self learning. But there are some bits that could probably be missed, which you could not all your questions or your queries will be answered by a blog. Like some of us have very particular kind of questions, and those can be answered by a person itself, because or by a teacher who is offering calligraphy services. So if you have those kind of pointed questions, then seek out a mentor or a teacher who will be able to help you with those.
I think just as a small addition to that,
Yeah.
do make sure that they are not going to ask you for your thumb at the end of it, because you need it for your calligraphy. So
Okay.
with that, that's all I had for today. I'd like to call Subodh to join us, and he'll take it further.
Sure.
Hi Rachna, good evening. How are you?
Hi. Oh, good evening. How are you?
Subodh, I think
I'm,
your camera
I'm
is off.
fine.
yeah, I guess it's cameras.
Is it?
Subodh, you need to turn your camera on. I think he's okay. He's back.
Yeah, better now? Or
No, I think it's buffering
No,
screen.
okay. Give me a
not.
second.
Yeah. So while we wait for Subodh,
Yeah.
uh, another thing that I would like to know from you is how much practice does it take to get at some decent level in calligraphy? So the only two people I honestly know on a one-to-one level is you and Prasad, and I know that both of you put in a lot of practice. So for somebody as lazy as me, what is the bare minimum practice that I would need to get some good kind of calligraphy going?
I guess it differs from person to person, but not giving you a very politically correct answer here. So I've been doing it since every day for the last 4 years, and um, like I try earlier. I with work I was not able to do as much, so it would probably be in the night for an hour before I go to sleep. But with when my script started getting better, I started putting in much more hours, and it would just be and I don't think you should see practice uh, as a task. If when you start looking at something as a thing that you need to just tick off your list, it's never going to come out
Right.
well. So if you do it just for yourself, and maybe it could just be half an hour of good practice or just half an hour of mindful practice, your script is going to be really good. And I think it makes a lot more, and it should be. I think what one thing when you're practicing you should keep in mind is just keep your cell phones away, because the world is so much out there to get you, because you just like you'll probably look at something someone else has done and you'll probably be, oh my god, I'm not so good at this, how am I going to do? And that thought itself in your head while practicing is not a good thing to have. So maybe half an hour or 1 hour of mindful practice away from any social media or the TV or anything, and with some good music, I think it works a lot and takes you a long way. That's what I do. I do it for an hour every day, and now I do, like, since I have learned so many scripts, I it's difficult for me to practice one thing and concentrate on one. So I have broken down my week into, okay, one day Spencerian, one day copperplate, one day Old English, one day Fraktur, one day Devanagari, because the days are not enough and there's too much to do and there's too much to learn. So that's how I've kept on practicing. So 1 hour every day, whatever happens, this is what I will do. So I practice at night. So whenever a time is suitable for you, and it's absolutely important that you practice your basics. What we tend to do is, most of us, the capital letters look the most fanciest of the lot, and they're most beautiful, and the lowercase ones are not that good looking, and we tend to ignore those. So because what we don't understand is your lowercase are the ones that you're going to be using a lot more than your capital letters. Your capital is going to be used in the beginning of the sentence, and your lowercase is going to come in far more when you're writing. So the more you practice your basic strokes, which form your lowercase letters, and then do your lowercase letters as well. Like, probably when you're starting, take one letter a day. Like, today I will do my basic strokes and I will do my lowercase a. Then tomorrow I will do my basic strokes, I will do my lowercase b, and it could be just probably half an hour of it, and you will see that your script has been improving, because it will be 26 days of 26 letters, and you'll be like, okay, now you're really good at your lowercase. Then you can probably move to your capital letters and then keep practicing a lot more words. If you do this, I think, for every script, and that's how I have been practicing, it helps a lot more. One thing, what will happen is when you practice when you practice this way, is you'll develop muscle memory. You don't have to keep looking at the script or to keep going back and looking at your reference sheets that how is this letter formed. You'll start remembering that because you have already written out an entire A4 sheet of A's, so you know how the letter form is formed. All you need to do is now start refining it a lot more, so that can keep happening on an everyday basis. That's it's a long run, so it's going to take time, and don't be so hard on yourself. I think one thing that we all do is just beat ourselves up when we are practicing, that I'm not good enough, or it's just that thought itself, that slight trigger is, I guess, which puts us on the back foot, and that shouldn't be there.
So I think Subodh is back with us. I'll
Yes.
let him take it forward from here. I'll see
Sure.
you at the end of the session, Rachna. Yeah.
Yes.
Bye.
Sure. Bye.
So I am here, but I don't know. I hope my net is better now.
Yes, we can see you.
Yeah, good. That's good. Yeah. So fantastic session. Amazing. A lot of things about the holders, the nibs, the paper types. That was all 100% new information for me. It was fantastic to listen to all this. So
Thank you.
yeah, I have a few questions as well. I think you have answered the next one almost entirely. The question is
Okay.
how much practice and what type of practice do you recommend? So I think you have answered that. Right?
Yes, I do.
Or,
Yeah.
yeah. So we can move on to the next one then.
Sure.
So the next question is, you had participated at FPAI's Fountain at the exhibition that we had organized a couple of years back, and for us, for FPAI organizers as well as visitors, having you there was a great experience. So how was your experience like? Associating with a fountain pen hobby association and joining them,
Yeah.
and what kind of value do you see in associations like FPAI?
Okay. Firstly, it was a great time. I mean, before you guys, before the exhibition is when I met you all, and that's when you invited me to be there. It was an amazing experience. It opened up a new world. I made so many kind of new friends. Like I met Prasad for the first time there. Like I think among all of you guys, he's the one who also does calligraphy and uses fountain pen to a great length. So I had someone whom I could actually speak about all of them, and through him and through and I think because of the exhibition, there were so many pen makers there as well, that I got to know about FlexNib pens right there at on that day. And before that, I had absolutely no idea that you could use fountain pens for calligraphy also. And Prasad himself had a couple of FlexNib vintage pens with him. Like it was an amazing collection. I got to try most of them. It works so well. I mean, no one really thought that you could use a fountain pen and with fountain pen ink for calligraphy and pointed pen calligraphy. So it kind of like as calligraphers or as a community, like you say, fountain pen is a separate community and calligraphy is a separate community, is actually more or less the same. It's just you just need to open up your mind a lot more and be open to learning. Because for me, it was like it just opened up a new world, and I was like, oh, this is what I want to do, and this is what I want to learn. It was just so much of information to process, and so many people to meet, because I had absolutely like I would say I was a noob in fountain pen. I still am, I feel. And for me to open up and understand, like, there are so many fountain pen inks that you can probably use for pointed pen calligraphy, or there's so much that you could learn. Like even your fountain pen can be used for doing Spencerian or cursive writing, which probably none of we did cursive back when we were in school, and but no one ended up practicing. And I mean, now with the lockdown, like you see a lot more people turning to these kind of scripts and turning to these kind of hobbies as such. And I think with the exhibition, for me, it was about meeting a lot of people. And I guess in calligraphy, we don't have such a community where people actually sit down, meet, have exhibitions, and share knowledge or share what they know. It's more like like a virtual community than being physically present, which I think matters a lot more. Like you guys being there, and it's just a nice experience that everyone's out there to help you, or even when you don't understand something, no one just shush you away saying that, oh, you don't know anything, and they're always there to explain things and tell you how things work. And I guess for me, being from calligraphy to being a part of your fountain pen community meant a lot more. It still means a lot. And the exhibition, what I got to see was the amazing collection of the pens that you all have. I mean, I have never seen fountain pen. I think the only fountain pen I ever used when I was back in school was the China ones, which have a small tip coming out. I don't know what they are called, but like having pens which are custom made, metal ones, wood inscribed pens, or hand painted ones, I've never seen something like that. And it was like you guys opened a can of worms for me, and I'm like, okay, this is everything I saw is what I wanted. And I think I was just very glad to be a part of it.
I am sorry. I think his feed is frozen again, Rachna.
Yes, yes,
Yes. So we'll just wait for Subodh to come
sure.
on back. So, I mean, very interesting question about FPI and Fountainhead. If you had to, I mean, you spoke about a number of things that you found very interesting out there.
Yeah.
If you had to tell us about that one single pen or an ink that caught your fancy, I know you talked about Prasad and his collection of vintage flex pens. I mean, it's something which even in the fountain pen world is a rarity, right?
Yeah.
He's a completely different kind of a person and an amazing person with an amazing collection. But
Absolutely.
generally speaking, if something just stood out for you, what would that have been?
Mm, what stood out for me was, I think, the amount of pens that you guys had, I think, put up on display, and that was not the only thing. The most important thing is, I guess, y'all had different kinds of people available over there from the fountain pen community, that, like, right from people who would grind the nib to the makers. So it was, for a new person, it is like, who's just introduced into the world. You can have a lot of information right there, and having those kind of people there to answer those questions for you, and a community being right there to help you out. And I mean, you guys, I mean, Sudhi, you were there, Kshitij was there, Subodh was there, I met all of you guys were there. It is, I think, everybody was so much more approachable, and it was not that you couldn't go and ask a silly question to someone. And the amount of pens that I got to see on display, it was absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that was there. So Subodh is back, and
Yes.
I will let him
Yeah,
go on with the questions that he had planned for you.
yeah. Very sorry, some issue with my net.
No
Surprisingly, just
problem.
now, till now, it was all fine. So yeah, let's see. So the next question that I had for you, and I'm sure at least I have been, eager to see this. I'm sure all our viewers will also be very eager about this. Uh, can you actually give us a demonstration of writing in different calligraphy scripts and styles, if that is possible?
Yes, I could do that. I'll have to switch to the other camera, and I could
Yeah.
probably show you the different styles.
Rachana, I'm liking this part a lot.
Just let's try most of the photos, like I promised. Just a sec. Hello, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm using a straight holder. Let me just show you what I do in the script that I like the most, modern calligraphy. So I'll just write the word your name. Let's write your name itself.
Oh, thank you.
Now this is slightly italic. When I was telling Sudhir also that you could use a straight holder to write slightly italics, I've kept my book at an angle so that I'm able to get it right. Now I could
Right.
show you doing like copper plate with an with an oblique holder. And same thing, you could now Spencerian you could even do with I just this is one of the fountain pens I have,
Okay.
which you could use for doing Spencerian. It's got a flex nib, so I could show you something with this. Like in Spencerian, there are not many. Like if you compare it to both of them, there are the lowercase letters will be able to tell you which script basically. So Spencerian has almost like no shades in the script. Like this is a very
Okay.
simple looking as like you could also do. So the capital letters are the only ones which have shades, while rest of them, they're very, very light shades to them. Um, and the same thing. Just give me a second.
Yeah.
You could also write. Now this is a broad edge pen, which you could use, like a right cut nib one, which you could use for Devanagari, and it has fountain pen ink in it. I've put in Krishna inks Jungle Volcano, so I tried with that. Probably this side. And it's the other pile parallel. Could use it for.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you
Yeah. So fantastic demonstration. Copper plated self-explanatory. So Sudhir
Yes.
and Oliver, as you say, that is in Spencerian.
Yes. So Dhiren Oliver is what I've written Spencerian. The capital S is exactly not like that, but I've written a very simple one because I've not yet gone into doing a lot more of capitals in Spencerian since I've learned it. Because like I told you, I prefer practicing lowercase first, and then I will move to words doing my capitals. It's slightly more complicated, so do it later.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thanks a lot for the demonstration. This was very
Thank
nice.
you.
And as I said, the part is I like the part. It's a very nice part. The writing part. I believe it will be helpful for practice as well.
Yes, absolutely. It would.
Yeah. So moving on to our next question.
Yes.
You, as you said, you are a calligrapher, and
Right.
Fountainhead was one of the first times that you realized fountain pens can be used for calligraphy. And I believe since then you have been
Yes.
using fountain pens. You showed us, you mentioned, that you have used some fountain pens. So could you just show us your fountain pens once again? You
Yes.
did a demonstration with a cut nib pen and I believe Spencerian a pen specifically for Spencerian.
Right. You want me to show it to you right here on paper or on the screen?
On the screen is also good enough. Yeah.
So okay, so I have a couple of them which are my favorite. One is this one. It's made by one of my friend called Avinash. It's got a flex nib in this. Ideally, the nib is made in such a way that it could be used for Spencerian a lot easily. It's very fine, very sharp, so it works very well for doing point pen calligraphy, especially Spencerian. Second one that I have is a custom made pen by MK Art. Mukesh makes them. This is a flex nib. It looks basically like the fountain pen nib, but if I add pressure to this nib, it will produce the thick and thin stroke. So I could use it for copper plate or for modern calligraphy. So it's got it's slightly more flexible compared to this one.
Okay.
And if I could even use the same nib for my regular writing, so it works well that way also. So, and I could use any of my fountain pen inks for any of these pens, so that way like in fountain pens, whether you're doing calligraphy, you can't add any calligraphy inks in any of these pens. You need to use fountain pen inks. They will just clog the insides of the pen, and it won't flow. So fountain pen inks works great. And the other one is with it's the one Kshitij had gifted me the first time, and it's a broad, it's a stub, I think, nib of the pen, and it is so smooth to write with. And this is one of my pens I always carry around with me whenever I'm traveling, so it kind of works really well for me. And and so this pen that I got made from Mukesh, it has different, I got different sections made in the pen so that I could keep changing them. So one to a Devanagari nib, and he basically made that for me, and then one to a regular fountain pen nib as well. So these are just couple of them I can easily carry around. So I use also.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks a lot for that. So it was a great session so far. Enjoyed it quite a lot. I'm sure the viewers have also enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Should we move on to the questions? Mr. Jayendra Pandya is asking, do we have fountain pens with Spencerian nibs? If yes, where? So,
Okay.
I think, yeah.
Sure. So basically, fountain pens with Spencerian nibs as such, no. You could get a pen made with a flex nib, which you could use as for any of the pointed pen scripts. Like my friend Avinash, he has a store called Oricali. They are making these flex nib pens only meant for Spencerian. So you could probably get in touch with them, and they'll make one for you. But if you're looking at pointed pen nibs for Spencerian, you can use any of the G nibs for Spencerian, because you need a slightly more stiff nib when you're doing writing Spencerian. It needs to be sharp. Your strokes need to be really fine. So a Nico G or the Tachikawa G, these nibs work really well. Personally, I'm not a big fan of Nico G. It doesn't work for me. It hits me in return. So I prefer the Tachikawa, even though it's slightly more sharper than the Nico G. So you could have a look at that, and you could use it in a straight holder. It will work very well, or you could use it in an oblique holder, whatever you prefer. Because if you use it in an oblique holder, it will help you write at the 52-degree angle which Spencerian requires. But if you're looking at fountain pens, the flex nib works well as well.
No. Next question we have from Jaspreet. It's an interesting question, I should say. Are you following and doing Inktober?
No, actually, I've been thinking
Okay.
for so many years, and I've never gotten around to, why is 1 month dedicated to doing, using your pens or to ink. I do it every day, so I don't have like I haven't done it, but maybe I'm not too late for the party. I can start next year, maybe not this year. This year, I think a couple of days have already gone by, but next year I hope I'll be able to do this. It'll help me illustrate, also pick up my illustration pens and do some illustration work along with doing calligraphy along. But I haven't. I'm sorry, I haven't participated in October.
Yeah.
But answering your next question, that is, how do you do it daily? Is it's just about looking at it from a perspective of a craft or doing something for yourself, rather than looking at it as a task that you need to tick off. The minute it becomes a job on your job list, or a tick mark or a task, you're not going to be able to do it if you see it that way. The most important thing is to not look at it that way. Like, if you look at it from a perspective, you're doing it for fun, or you're doing it for yourself and for your peace of mind, or like therapy for yourself, then you will be able to do it every day. And don't it doesn't have to be, if you're doing in October, there are people doing simple illustrations or simple writing also. You could do it, start from from doing something simple, rather than like I said, social media is good and it's bad as a place also, because it influences you so much. You see only the good part, but you're not seeing people who are even doing basic work. Now, even the simple work
that happens to me.
It happens to the best of us. It happens to me too. Like, that, like, you're always learning. There is no dirt to it. But sometimes your mind plays funny games with you, and that's when you kind of start to doubt yourself, or you start feeling you're not good enough. And I think that's something we need to work upon, that what you're doing every day is learning and improving, and if you keep that in mind, I'm guessing everything else falls in place.
And next question. Sorry.
No problem.
Sorry, that was my mistake.
No, that's okay.
Any sources to download handwriting practice PDFs?
I know a paid source where you could download for cursive. If you've heard of Creative Market, it's a website where you would find American cursive handwriting PDFs very easily. They're all digital downloads. Even if you're looking for copperplate, there are a lot of artists there, so you have to check which works for you. And a lot of images on screen, so you can just go through it and see what you want and download that. There are different kinds of subscriptions that are available. You can choose whatever you like. Free resources, I'm not really sure anybody would be putting. Not a lot of people have free resources. And handwriting practice, you can also look at IMPET. There will be definitely in the resources section where you'll find the script for that, the American cursive script for writing for your practice as well.
Okay. Looking at the next question now, from Mihir, and I think you spoke briefly about this.
Yes.
How would you differentiate between calligraphy and Spencerian?
So they are the same. They are two different scripts within the pointed pen calligraphy. The only differentiation, like if you want to tell between a copperplate and the Spencerian one, the Spencerian one is written slightly faster without having many shades in the lowercase letters. Whereas the copperplate or the modern calligraphy has a variation of stroke between the thick and thin stroke. So it's made up of both of these strokes, whether it's the lowercase or the uppercase letters. In Spencerian is only the capital letters have a slightly more shade compared to your lowercase letters. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
It was fantastic having you here. Even the answers specifically for the Inktober challenge, even if you're not doing it, how does one stick to that? How does one do that? And even about calligraphy. So I think I'll invite Kshitij and Sudhir back on the screen now.
Sure.
That was a very, very interesting session, especially the on-screen calligraphy. That was awesome. Really interesting to watch. Yeah. And thanks for
You didn't
writing
write my name, Rachna.
I was wondering.
I wrote you a letter. I'll write you another one
Okay.
for sure.
Fair. That's fair enough.
Anyway, so Rachna, what we do is
Yeah.
we have this little ritual at the
Okay.
towards the end of every session,
Right.
where we kind of just discuss what pens we have that are currently inked.
Lovely.
So this time, I will ask you as the guest to go first and let us know which are the pens that you have inked before we start with the others.
Okay. I have the fountain pen inked with Krishna inks, Moonview 2. And I have I have all of them inked by Krishna inks only. I have the Flex Nib one with wild cherry in it, the Krishna inks wild cherry. And the other Flex Nib one is with Krishna Ink's eye black ink in it. All of them have Krishna inks because I just refilled them before the session. But I like the Pelican inks as well. They're really nice to work with. So I guess I'll move on to you guys.
Kshitij, why don't you go next?
So I still have my Pentagram 101 here.
Wow.
It's still the same ink that I had during the last session. Not managed to run out of ink yet on this one. So no new pens for me.
Okay, cool. Subodh?
Interestingly, it was a coincidence. Today's session, and I got an interesting parcel from Samay. That's the
Ooh.
quality airmail 69P. But the interesting part is
Oh
it
my
has
god,
the
is that
flex
the G-Nib?
nib. Yeah, it has a G nib. So
Wow.
I inked it, I think, at 5 in the evening. Still not written much with it, just a few lines. But the next few days, I'll be going crazy with this nib, I believe. And right now, it has one of my favorite blue inks. Yeah, a bit hard to pronounce, just like all sailor inks. AOK blue or whatever they call it. But it's one of the blue inks that I like.
Wow.
Okay, so coming to me, I have about 9 pens inked, but I'm only going to talk about 2 or 3. And the first one that I'll be talking about is this pen which I got. This is a Ranga pen. It's the Ranga Duofold. The reason it's interesting is because I decided to dedicate this pen for one of the most controversial inks in fountain pen hobby, which is the Noodler's Bay State Blue. So going forward, this is a pen that's going to be my pen for Noodler's Bay State Blue. It is inked. I've not run out of it. It was inked a couple of weeks back, but I still have it. Then the other one that I wanted to show was this very beautiful pen called Swan. The interesting part is this is a Swan pen, which was manufactured in India under license from the Baby Todd company. So this is called the Swan Warwick, and lovely little pen, very small. It's got a beautiful fine nib, and I have this inked with Daytone, the new set of extra fine inks. Leaf green is what I have it inked with. This pen is just a joy to write with. Now, normally I don't go for fine pens so much, but this pen is something completely different. It's really beautiful. I also tuned the nib a little bit for my style of writing, and just love this pen.
Can we see the
And
nib on that as well?
yeah, sure. It has a gold nib. It's a 14 karat gold nib,
Oh, nice.
which has a yeah. It's a superb pen. And the best part is this entire thing, including the nib, was made in India. And this was in, I believe, in the 50s or the 60s, whenever Matre Pens had the license to manufacture these pens. So just something, we had a very fascinating history and tradition of fountain pens. Somewhere we just kind of lost it. Not just India, I think across the world. And the final one I have is this one. I just inked it up. It's a Moon Man. And or a Lekai. I don't know, one of the two. Maybe it's a Lekai, not a
This
movement.
is a Lekai.
It's a Lekai. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not an expert on the on pens from the sea country. So this is it's an eyedropper. and it has Chelpa Crimson Violet, which somebody was telling me they had a pen which got stained when they used it with Chelpa Crimson Violet. I had not heard of these issues earlier. I decided let me just take a demonstrator, put in the pen, and see how easy it is to clean. And then, worst case, it's something that I can sacrifice. So those are my 3 pens which I wanted to show today.
Wow.
Fantastic.
I'm really interested in the swan pen, the ink that you have in it, the green color. I definitely want to see the leaf green. It looks beautiful.
Yeah, it's a lovely color. It's a very interesting color, right? So yeah,
Amazing.
very nice.
And Subodh's pen, you're going to tell me how it is. How's the G nib working in it? I think I have to get it.
I'll tell you about that.
Just remember to take it out if you're putting
Yes.
the pen away
Yeah.
for a while. Otherwise,
From your
end
experience,
up like me.
yes.
Yeah.
So I had one of the nib units land at my place today too, but it came to office after I left, so I'm yet to collect it.
Oh.
So
How
I
many
actually
pens
got
do you all have now? Like all 3 of you all. How many have they? What's the count? Each one of you.
Count of pens?
Yes. Since the last time I met you all, I think it must have gone up by like every month by 1. No, like it's been a while.
Who
I
wants
don't
to go
think any
first?
of us wants to really mention a number.
so I'll go and say that I have too many pens, and that should give you a hint.
Very politically correct answers you all are giving.
I'll say that I have just enough. And how many do you have, Subodh?
I'm between Chitij and Sudhir.
So then,
between
yeah.
just enough and too many.
Too many. So that's so one interesting thing I wanted to show is this nib unit that landed today. Just show this. This is a very huge nib. Okay, it's called the BB nib,
Oh,
and
okay.
pretty interesting nib, and it's huge. It's like almost an inch and a half or something like that. That's how large the
Yeah.
nib is. Really
Yeah.
very fascinating nib. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but yeah, I have it. It's reached today, and let's see what I'll have to plan a pen. I don't think there are feeds for this, so we'll have to figure out a feed and then figure out a pen. So build a pen around the nib. That's interesting. A couple of people have done that. Kshitij has one of these. So I think he
actually
has
have
both of
two,
these.
and
He has two.
I have 2 of those. And the pen, other than the nib, everything was done by Manoj of Phosphor. So
Yeah.
that is one way for you to go if you want to.
Yeah.
So there's
Figure that
a
out.
request from the audience. V. Vesukar. Can we get a glimpse of the flex nib on Lami Safari looking pen? Rachna?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
the one with which you wrote, Spencer.
Where do I show it in this camera?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not sure. Sorry. Okay, 1 second. I'm
A
just trying to
little
get-
bit higher. Oh, okay, yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry about. Wait. I just.
Do you want to put it down on the
Yeah.
paper? Yeah, let's do that.
So
Yeah.
Just- Yeah, we can.
I don't know what I'm doing with this. Yeah.
So this is actually quite interesting. I would want to get one of these too.
Yeah, it's
I'm
pretty
sure
interesting.
all of us will want to get this.
Yeah, it's a very fine nib. Like you could barely see it. I was trying to look if I could, what nib it is, but cannot. I totally cannot make out what nib was this.
So
It's
there's
very
another
interesting.
question.
It's not a standard, standard Lamy-like looking.
Yeah, it's just the
It's not a
the pen
Lamy nib.
design is. It's not a Lamy nib for sure. It's just the design of the pen. They have taken that, but yeah, it's completely different nib.
It's not even a Lamy clone. I mean, Chinese Lamy clone, because the body is different. The section and the nib is something else. So quite interesting.
So I think the section up to the part that is rounded,
You want me to open
just
up?
before it starts tapering up,
Yeah. Yes, Sudhir.
That is a Lamy. That looks like a Lamy converter.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does look like a Lamy converter. So I think the part where the normal nib and feed go in, uh, above that is the part that they have modified. So that small circle collar at the end, towards the end, halfway up, that's
The
from up to
hood
that.
for the nib.
Yeah, where the plastic ends, Rachna, the round part of it,
Yeah,
which is like a collar.
yeah.
Yeah,
This portion.
correct. That portion up to that, it's a standard Lamy pen, and then they either modified it above that or completely changed the feed, the nib and the feed there. That's what it looks like. I could be mistaken.
It does look like that.
Interesting.
Where did you get this from? Once again, for the viewers.
I got it from Uri Cali. You can check them out on Instagram.
So he's getting flooded today.
Yeah, definitely. I'm sure. I'll let him know. I think the next tomorrow they are coming up with the new. They're adding more pens to their store. So tomorrow is the day you need to look out for.
Oh, great.
It's very interesting. I mean, for the price, it writes really well. Like I paid 450 rupees or 500. 450 or 500.
So for a flex nib or a decent flex nib, that's a really good price.
Yeah, it's very good because the other one that I got made, it was I think close to 3,000 for the nib. So
these Nico G nib units that are coming with the block threading, they're somewhere in the price range of around 4 grand just for the nib unit without the pen. So
wow.
As compared to that, I think something like this is quite nice.
So Rachna, that was 450 for the whole pen.
Yeah. For the whole
then
thing.
Then I don't think it's a
couple of them.
I don't think it's based off a Lamy chassis then.
Yeah, because the pen itself of Lamy comes for about, the Safari would be about 2,500, right? It looks like a Lamy, but it isn't.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
Right,
guys.
So,
yep.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're saying something?
I just had a question for Subodh. So, the new pen that you got with the G nib, so you're gonna have to remove the nib, and can you keep changing it on your own?
Yeah, I can actually. So it's in a way it's pretty simple to use. There's a unit inside.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can remove the nib.
Okay. So just pull it out and.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Or you could leave it inside, wait for it to rust, and then get stuck in the.
and then send 2 pens to Sudhir instead of 1. That could work too. Yeah.
So Rachna, that was really a very interesting and lively session. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks Subodh, thanks Kshitij for all your contribution. It was lovely having you, Rachna.
Thank you so much.
Have spent a weekend. Yeah, and it was our pleasure. And it was really a very, very interesting and very lively session. So thank you so much for that. Subodh, Kshitij, any last words before we conclude?
Thank you. Thanks a lot. That was a fantastic.
Thanks.
I had a lot of fun.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Rachna.
Thank you,
Have
then.
a good weekend, guys.
Bye.
You too. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye, Rachna. See you. So to our viewers, thank you very much for attending that session. And please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already done that. Please hit the bell icon to get reminded of these videos. Please like this video. That really helps us with the analytics on YouTube. We will be back with another session very soon. And till then, have a good weekend and have fun. Thank you so much.